She served a stranger with kindness. By morning, she was fired without warning. What Haley didn't know was that the man she helped was secretly her boss, and he'd been watching everything. Why did he call her that night? And what was the real reason he asked to meet her face to face? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The scent of sizzling bacon, grilled onions, and brewed coffee clung to the air inside Harvest Hill Diner. On Saturday evenings, the place turned into organized chaos. Booths were full, families huddled around chipped tables, and the clatter of dishes echoed over the low hum of classic rock on the jukebox. Orders were being yelled across the kitchen, fryers hissed, and waitstaff weaved between tables like dancers avoiding collision. The pace didn't slow. It never did. Haley Jensen was on her 6th hour without a break, her apron stained, her back tight with tension. She balanced 2 plates on one arm, dropped off orders with practiced grace, then spun around to grab a refill for a toddler demanding more apple juice. She didn't complain. She rarely did. Complaining didn't get you rent money. Complaining didn't help her little brother stay in college. Across the room, Darren, the manager, stood by the milkshake machine, laughing at something Nikki said, their shoulders brushing too easily for work-price professionalism. Darren had been sitting out of the rush since the first customer walked in. Every so often, he would glance over the floor, pretending to be busy, then go back to joking or scrolling his phone. 2 new servers had already burned out for the night, but Darren hadn't lifted a finger. "Don't waste time on the no-tippers," Darren had told them at the last team meeting. "Focus on the tables that look like money." It wasn't written anywhere, but everyone understood. If someone walked in looking rough, tired, or too modestly dressed, they were often ignored. Haley hated it, but she didn't argue. She needed the job. That's when the door opened again. A man walked in alone. Middle-aged. Plain clothes, button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans, worn sneakers. He looked like someone's exhausted uncle after a long day of work. He stood near the entrance quietly, hands in his pockets, waiting for someone to greet him. No one did. Rick, one of the cooks, peeked from behind the line, then went right back to his conversation with Darren. Nikki glanced up from her tray, then turned her attention to the table full of men in business suits, laughing loudly near the front window. The new hostess didn't even look up, but Haley noticed. She was rushing back toward the kitchen to drop off a ticket when her eyes caught his. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just waited. Quiet. She stopped. Her tray tilted slightly in her hand, and she shifted the weight back into balance. She hesitated only a second before stepping out of her usual path and walking toward him. "Hi there," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Sorry about the wait. Welcome to Harvest Hill. Can I get you a table, or would you like something to go?" The man looked at her slowly, his gaze calm, focused. Then he smiled. It was small, almost private. "Nice to finally be noticed," he said. Haley blinked, unsure if she should laugh or apologize. Instead, she nodded and smiled back. "Come on, I'll take care of you." She led him to a small booth tucked against the far wall, away from the louder tables and nearer to the kitchen's swinging doors. It wasn't the fanciest spot, but it was clean and calm. Haley wiped down the table quickly, set down a menu, and offered him water before he even asked. "Take your time with the menu," she said. "I'll be back in a minute." As she stepped away, she caught Darren glaring at her from across the room. His expression was unmistakable. He wasn't happy. She could already hear Nikki whispering something behind the counter, probably calling her a tryhard. Rick snickered just loud enough to be heard over the noise of the grill. Haley ignored all of it. Returning a few minutes later with a glass of water, she found the man studying the menu, his eyes moving slowly over the options like someone who genuinely cared what kind of cheese came on each burger. "Any questions?" she asked, setting the glass in front of him. "I think I'll keep it simple," he replied, folding the menu neatly. "Double cheeseburger, no onions, fries, extra crispy if possible, and a black coffee." Haley nodded, entering it into her pad. You got it. He watched her closely as she wrote, then tilted his head slightly. You've got a good attitude, he said softly. Caught off guard, Haley looked up. I just believe in treating everyone the same. Doesn't matter who walks through the door. He smiled again, almost like he already knew she'd say that. I respect that. She gave a polite nod and moved toward the kitchen. Behind her, she could feel eyes on her back. Darren leaned against the prep counter, arms crossed. His mouth twisted as she passed. What a waste of energy, she heard Nikki mutter under her breath. Haley pushed through the kitchen doors and handed Rick the ticket. Extra crispy on the fries, please. He gave her a look like she was asking for the moon. Haley stood her ground. Back at the coffee machine, she poured a fresh cup instead of using the one that had been sitting under the burner too long. She wiped down the mug, set it carefully on a tray with cream and sugar packets, and checked the order as soon as it was ready. She made sure the burger had no onions, that the fries were just right, that the coffee was fresh and hot. She delivered the tray to his table and placed everything down neatly. The man picked up the coffee, turned it slightly in his hand, then looked up at her again. Thank you, Haley. She froze. Her name tag was tucked beneath the strap of her apron. She hadn't introduced herself. Do I know you? She asked carefully. He didn't answer. He just smiled, popped a fry into his mouth, and nodded approvingly. Haley stood there, puzzled, as he turned his attention to his food like nothing unusual had just happened. Haley returned to her station slowly, her thoughts swirling. The man hadn't looked familiar, but the way he'd said her name, it wasn't casual. It was intentional, measured. She glanced back at him. He was calmly eating, eyes occasionally scanning the diner, like he was seeing more than just the decor, like he was watching people, not walls. Darren watched her too. As she grabbed a cloth to wipe down a nearby table, he stepped closer. Didn't I tell you not to waste time on the low tippers? He said quietly, his voice sharp beneath his fake smile. Haley didn't flinch. He waited 5 minutes without anyone greeting him. Hell, didn't look like he was here to spend, Darren replied, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve. Next time, let someone else deal with the wanderins. Treating someone with respect isn't a waste of time, she said firmly. Darren's jaw flexed, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned on his heel and walked back toward Nikki, who was wiping ketchup bottles with exaggerated slowness. The shift continued. The usual crowd came and went. Teenagers on dates, tired parents with kids, a trucker who ordered 2 slices of cherry pie and tipped exactly $2. Haley stayed focused, but part of her attention kept drifting back to the man in the booth. He didn't rush. He took his time with the meal, like he had nowhere else to be, and every so often he looked around the diner with a kind of quiet assessment that made her uneasy. Eventually, he finished. He stood, straightened his jacket, and left a $20 bill under the empty coffee cup. No receipt, no card. Just cash and a folded napkin on the tray. Haley walked over and picked it up. The napkin had been folded precisely, and inside it was a handwritten note in small, tidy script. Kindness is a choice, you made the right one. No signature, no name, just that single sentence. Haley felt a chill crawl down her spine. She looked toward the door, but he was gone. Just like that. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She replayed the moment over and over, trying to make sense of it. Who was he? Why had he seemed so calm when the rest of the diner was in chaos? And how had he known her name? She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket and said nothing. When the night finally ended and she peeled off her shoes in the break room, her feet ached and her shoulders burned, but the strange encounter stayed with her. She didn't know it yet, but that man, the quiet one in the booth, had just turned her entire world upside down. And by morning, everything would change. The next morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen when Haley arrived at Harvest Hill Diner. Her hair was still damp from a rushed shower, and she carried her usual to-go cup of coffee, half full, barely warm. The diner was quiet in that early hour. Only a few prep cooks were inside, clanging pans and checking deliveries. The calm before the daily storm. She stepped through the back entrance and headed for the lockers, ready to start another long shift. Her apron was already in hand when she heard Darren's voice echo across the hallway. "Haley, in the office." She paused mid-step. Something in his tone didn't sit right. It was cold, clipped, too formal for the usual lazy sarcasm he tossed around like sugar packets. She followed him without a word, pushing the door open and stepping into the cramped office behind the kitchen. The room was always stuffy, lined with filing cabinets that hadn't been touched in years, and a cluttered desk topped with old shift schedules and chipped coffee mugs. Darren sat behind the desk, arms folded, waiting like he'd been preparing for this moment. He didn't invite her to sit. "We've been reviewing our staffing numbers," he began, his voice overly calm. "With the way things are trending, we're going to have to make some reductions." Haley blinked. "What?" He cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, we're letting you go." The words hit like a punch. She took a full second to process them. "You're firing me?" Darren nodded slowly, like it was out of his hands. "It's not personal." She stared at him. "But we're short-staffed. I covered 2 people's tables last night." He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "It's just a business decision." Haley clenched her jaw. "No, it's not. It's because I served that man last night, the one everyone ignored." His eyes didn't flinch, but a muscle in his cheek twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice rising. "You watched me serve him." "You didn't like it." Darren sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This isn't up for debate. I've worked doubles. I've never missed a shift. I've done everything you asked, everything. And we appreciate your contribution," he said smoothly, already pulling a folded paper from a drawer. "Here's your final check. You'll need to sign this release." Haley didn't move. He slid the paper across the desk, then gestured to the door. "You can pick up your things before the lunch crowd arrives." She stood frozen, heart pounding, then reached down and snatched the envelope without a word. When she opened the door to leave, the hallway outside was no longer empty. Nikki leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, a smirk tugging at her lips. Rick was refilling the soda machine nearby, but his eyes followed Haley's every move. They knew, and they were satisfied. Haley walked past them without a word. Her steps felt heavier with every stride. Each sound in the diner, the hiss of the fryer, the clink of silverware, suddenly seemed louder, harsher. The morning crew barely glanced her way as she moved through the kitchen, yet she could feel their awareness. The tension followed her like a second shadow. She grabbed her bag from the break room and paused by her locker. The apron that had hung there for a year now looked strange, like it belonged to someone else. Slowly she untied it, folded it neatly, and placed it on the shelf. Then she just stood there. The weight of what had just happened pressed into her chest like a stone. She wasn't being let go because of budget issues or a performance problem. She was being punished for showing basic decency to a man everyone else had dismissed. And somehow, they were okay with that. She took a breath, then another, and walked back toward the rear exit. As she pushed open the door, the early morning chill hit her face. It was sharp, almost bracing. The sun had risen a little higher, casting pale gold light over the cracked parking lot. She stood for a moment just outside the door, breathing it in, trying to steady herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, staring at the screen. Josh. Her younger brother. He'd left a text message. "Don't forget, I've got that book deposit due next week. Love you." She stared at the words. Josh didn't know. He was at school in Eugene, pushing through a grueling semester, working night shifts just to stay afloat. He didn't need to carry this on top of everything else. She always told him not to worry about her, that she had it handled. She unlocked the phone and pressed the call button before she could talk herself out of it. It rang once, then twice. "Hey, Hales," His voice was light, upbeat. "What's up? I was just walking to class." She opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Her throat tightened. "Everything okay?" he asked. She forced a laugh, light and casual. "Yeah, just wanted to check in. How's your morning?" "Oh, you know. Bleary-eyed and caffeine-dependent," he chuckled. "I've got contracts class in 10. Can't feel my brain yet." She smiled faintly. "You'll survive." "You sure you're good? You sound kinda off." "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Really, just a long morning." "All right," he said slowly. "Well, call me tonight? We can talk more then." "Definitely. Love you, sis." "Love you too." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. Her hand lingered there as she stared across the empty lot. She had no job, no plan. Rent was due in 12 days. Josh's tuition payments were looming. She hadn't even told him yet. But the part that hurt the most wasn't losing the paycheck. He was being told, without words, that doing the right thing didn't matter. Haley walked the few blocks home in silence, her shoes scraping the uneven sidewalk. Portland was waking up around her, coffee shops opening their doors, joggers weaving through intersections, baristas writing cheerful quotes on chalkboard signs. The world moved on, completely unaware that hers had come to a grinding halt. When she reached her apartment, she paused before climbing the narrow steps to her second-floor unit. Everything felt heavier. The key turned slower in the lock. The door creaked louder than usual. She stepped inside and shut it behind her, leaning against the frame as if holding herself upright took effort. The apartment was small but neat. A hand-me-down couch with frayed corners. A second-hand desk she'd painted herself. Photos of her and Josh's kids lined a narrow bookshelf beside the kitchen. Normally, the space made her feel safe. Today, it felt fragile. She walked to the counter, opened the envelope Darren had handed her, and pulled out the final check, $473.62. That wasn't even 2 weeks of rent. She set the check down like it was a threat. Her stomach growled, but she didn't have the appetite to respond. She opened the fridge out of habit. 3 eggs, half a bottle of orange juice, and some leftover pasta in a takeout box. She closed it again without grabbing anything. Instead, she drifted toward the couch and sat down slowly. The stillness of the room felt crushing. She stared at the spot on the table where her phone lay. She thought of calling her friend, Elisa, or maybe her old roommate, Sarah. But what would she say? "Hey, I got fired for being decent to a stranger." She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. All she'd done was treat someone like they mattered. No fanfare, no extra effort, just basic human kindness. And for that, she'd been thrown away. Her eyes drifted toward her purse on the floor. The corner of a folded napkin peeked from a side pocket. She reached down and pulled it out, slowly unfolding the square. "Kindness is a choice. You made the right one." The note from the stranger? From me. From the man no one had wanted to serve. The man who somehow knew her name. She read the line again, then again, her fingers pressing into the creases like she was trying to draw strength from the paper. Who was he? Why had he left her that note? She didn't know. And honestly, she wasn't even sure it mattered anymore. But something in her refused to crumble. Her job was gone. Her savings were thin. Her future felt like it had been yanked out from under her. Still, that quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered the one thing Darren hadn't expected. This isn't the end. Not yet. Not even close. The night crept in like a heavy fog, silent and slow, swallowing the last traces of light outside Haley's apartment. The street lamp outside her window flickered, casting long shadows across the wall. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No music, no television, no dinner simmering on the stove. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock above the sink. Haley sat cross-legged on the couch, wrapped in an old blanket. Her coat was still draped over the armrest, and her shoes remained by the door, untouched since she'd walked in hours ago. In her lap rested the envelope with her final paycheck, creased at the corners from how often she'd folded and unfolded it. $473.62. She'd stared at that number for over an hour now. Her rent was due in 9 days, her electric bill was sitting on the coffee table unopened, and Josh's next tuition deposit, scheduled for the end of the week, was more than double what she had left. She hadn't eaten. She couldn't. Her stomach was tight, coiled in anxiety. Every time she thought about walking into another diner or coffee shop and asking for a job, her throat closed up. How would she explain why she was let go? Would they even believe her? And yet, more than anything, she was angry. Not just because she'd been fired, not just because Darren had smiled while doing it, but because it had meant so little, as if decency was a flaw, as if kindness had no place in a world built on shortcuts and appearance. She leaned her head back against the couch and closed her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to make the ache in her chest quiet down. That's when her phone rang. The sound cut through the stillness like a blade. Her eyes opened instantly, her heart lurching with panic. She grabbed the phone from the table and stared at the screen. Unknown number. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to ignore it. She didn't have the energy for another scam call or an automated reminder of a bill she couldn't pay. But something in her gut whispered, "Pick up." She answered, "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice, calm, steady, familiar. "Good evening. Is this Haley Jensen?" She sat upright. "Yes, who is this?" Another pause, then the answer. "This is Keanu Reeves. I believe we met yesterday. You served me at Harvest Hill." She didn't respond at first. Her mind raced, unsure if she had misheard. Wait, what? "I hope this isn't a bad time," he continued, his tone soft. "But I wanted to speak with you. In person." She blinked, the weight of the day pressing harder on her chest. "Do you want to meet with me?" "If you're willing," he said. "Tomorrow morning. I'll text you the address." Haley opened her mouth to ask why, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't form. She just nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll be there." The call ended before she could say anything else. For a few seconds, she just sat there, staring at the screen. Keanu Reeves. That voice had been unmistakable, deep, calm, deliberate. It was the same voice that had thanked her in the diner, the same voice that had somehow known her name. She stared at her phone like it had just betrayed her. A second later, a new text came in. A.K. Leora, 8 o'clock, i.e. 437 Alder Street. I'll be waiting. S.K. Haley's fingers trembled slightly as she set the phone back on the table. Her thoughts whirled, emotions tangling in a knot she couldn't untie. What did he want? Was this some kind of mistake? Was he checking on her? None of it made sense. He was famous, a global icon. He had no reason to follow up with a waitress from a modest diner on the east side of Portland, and yet here he was, reaching out directly, calmly, and without explanation. She stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, a pair of teenagers skateboarding down the sidewalk passed under the flickering street lamp. The world continued as normal. But inside her apartment, everything had just shifted. Her gaze drifted to the corner of the couch where she had left the folded napkin from the day before. She picked it up and opened it again, reading the familiar words in the neat, handwritten script. "Kindness is a choice. You made the right one." She hadn't even thought about him leaving that message until now. It had felt strange, too personal for a stranger, too quiet to mean anything. But now it felt like a signal. Like he had known something even then. The napkin crinkled softly as she folded it again and slipped it into her purse. Her hands moved with practiced habit, even though her mind was still somewhere else entirely. She laid out her clothes for the morning. Clean jeans, her soft gray sweater, and the navy coat she reserved for job interviews. Her sneakers, still scuffed from the restaurant floor, sat by the door. Everything she did felt surreal, like she was preparing for a moment she hadn't asked for, hadn't planned for, and didn't understand. She brushed her hair and tied it back loosely, then turned off the light and stood in the doorway of her bedroom for a long time before she finally lay down. Sleep didn't come easily. Her mind kept racing through possible explanations. Was he offering her another job? Did he feel sorry for her? Was this all just some elaborate misunderstanding? And underneath all of that, a quieter voice asked the one question she couldn't shake. Why her? What had he seen in her that no one else did? The alarm buzzed at 6:45 IEM, but Haley was already awake. She hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of shallow thoughts, replaying every second of the call in her mind. The ceiling above her felt endless, her apartment somehow smaller than usual. She lay still for a few more seconds before sitting up and breathing in deeply. The air was cold. She wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders and shuffled toward the bathroom. The mirror greeted her with the ghost of yesterday's worry still lingering in her face. Dark circles, a slight puffiness around the eyes. But something else was there too, curiosity. And under that, a flicker of defiance. She didn't bother with makeup, just splashed water on her face, pulled her hair back into a ponytail, and changed into the clothes she'd set out the night before. The soft gray sweater hugged her arms, and the jeans felt snug but comforting. She laced her sneakers slowly, almost as if delaying the inevitable. By 7:30, she was on the bus heading toward Alder Street. The city had fully woken up now. Office workers gripped travel mugs. Cyclists weaved between cars. A little girl in a pink backpack sat beside her mother, humming a quiet tune as she watched the world blur past the window. Haley held her phone tightly in one hand, the napkin still tucked safely in her purse. Her heart thudded steadily as the bus neared her stop. Every passing block increased the pressure in her chest, but she stayed still, eyes locked on the street numbers above the doors. When the bus finally stopped at Alder and Fifth, she stepped off into a crisp breeze. The sky above was overcast, a pale gray dome hanging low above the city. She adjusted her jacket and walked slowly toward Café Leora. The cafe sat nestled between a bookstore and a flower shop, its windows glowing warmly from inside. The sign above the door was painted in soft gold lettering, the glass clean and welcoming. Inside, she could see shelves of pastries, amber lights, and a barista waving to someone in the corner. She took a breath, reached for the door handle, and stepped in. The scent of roasted beans and cinnamon hit her immediately, soft jazz humming low through the speakers. The room was warm, quiet, almost dreamlike. Near the front window, seated alone at a wooden table with a ceramic coffee cup in hand, was Keanu Reeves. He wore a charcoal suit jacket over a black shirt, no tie, casual but elegant. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were alert. As she entered, he looked up and met her gaze with the same calm intensity as before. "Haley," he said, nodding once. She stepped toward the table, every nerve firing at once. "You wanted to see me," she said. Keanu set his cup down gently. "Yes. I think it's time we had a real conversation." Haley pulled out the chair slowly, the cafe's warmth wrapping around her like a protective blanket. She sat across from Keanu, unsure whether to smile or brace herself. Her heart hadn't stopped pounding since she saw him sitting there, calm and quiet, like this was just another normal Tuesday morning. He studied her for a long moment, not with scrutiny, but with intention, like he was weighing something important before speaking. "Thank you for coming," he said finally, his voice smooth, familiar. Haley nodded. "I almost didn't." "I understand," he replied, offering a faint smile, "but I'm glad you did." A server passed by, setting a fresh coffee down in front of her. Haley wrapped her fingers around the mug out of instinct, the heat grounding her. "I wanted to meet you here," Keanu said. Because it's quiet. Neutral. She looked at him, confused. Neutral? He leaned back slightly, his eyes steady. Away from the noise. Away from Harvest Hill. Just hearing the diner's name made something tighten in her chest. I have to ask, she said carefully. Why me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. He placed it gently on the table, his fingers resting on the cover for a moment before sliding it aside. Before I answer that, he said, I need to tell you something about who I am, or rather, what I do. Haley leaned in, curiosity overriding her anxiety. You served me at Harvest Hill 2 nights ago. You didn't know me. I wasn't dressed well. I didn't carry myself like someone important. I was just a man standing in line, being ignored. She nodded slowly. I remember. Keanu looked out the window for a second, then turned back to her. I wasn't there by accident, he said. Harvest Hill Diner is one of my businesses. Haley blinked, not sure she'd heard correctly. Wait, you own it? He nodded. Not just that location, the whole chain. Quietly. I stay behind the scenes, let others run the day-to-day, but from time to time I walk in unannounced to see what's really happening. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She had no idea how to respond. I like to see how people behave when they don't think anyone's watching, he said softly. That's when you learn who they really are. She was stunned, completely speechless. All that time, she whispered, you were just sitting there, watching. I was observing, he corrected gently. Watching how the staff treated people. Watching how the managers led, or didn't. Watching how the place carried itself when no one thought it mattered. Her hands tightened around her mug. Her thoughts scrambled. All the whispered comments, the disregard, the arrogance. It hadn't been invisible. Someone had seen it. Someone with power. And she'd stepped forward when no one else did. Haley stared down at her coffee as the reality settled over her. The man everyone had ignored, the one Darren had deemed unworthy of attention, was the person who held the fate of the entire diner in his hands. And she'd served him, not because she knew who he was, but because it was the right thing to do. Keanu's voice brought her back. What I saw at that location troubled me. The culture of favoritism, the way some customers were dismissed based on appearance alone, the lack of accountability from leadership. She looked up, meeting his eyes. There was no anger in his tone, just calm observation, but the truth in his words cut deep. He continued, but among all that noise, you stood out. You didn't wait to be told to do the right thing. You did it because it was already in you. Haley swallowed hard. I didn't do anything special. I just treated you like I would treat anyone. And that, he said, is precisely what made it special. She felt her cheeks flush. The compliment was so direct, so personal, she didn't know how to receive it. For so long she had worked in the background, unnoticed, underappreciated. And now, the one time someone did notice, it was him. Keanu reached into his coat pocket again and this time pulled out a business card. He slid it across the table. Haley, I'd like to offer you the position of manager at the Harvest Hill location. She blinked, stunned. Manager? He nodded. Darren is no longer with the company. I've already arranged for the necessary changes. What I need now is someone I can trust to rebuild that location. Someone who will lead with integrity. Her hands hovered above the card, uncertain whether to touch it. I'm not a manager, she said quietly. I've never led a team. I've never done payroll or scheduling. I don't know the first thing about hiring people or writing performance reviews. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his tone gentler now. You don't need to be perfect, he said. You just need to care. Those words landed with unexpected weight. Simple, honest, and completely disarming. He could see the doubt in her face and let the silence stretch, giving her time to breathe. Then he spoke again. I can offer you training, support. You won't be doing this alone. But the heart of the restaurant, how people are treated, that has to come from you. And I've already seen what that looks like. She glanced down at the card again. Her fingers brushed the edge. The title below her name read, Acting General Manager, Harvest Hill Diner. It didn't feel real. He took a final sip from his coffee and set the cup aside. I won't pressure you. You don't have to decide today. Take tonight to think it over. Haley sat back in her chair, still holding the card between her fingers. The title printed on it looked too bold, too official, like it belonged to someone else, someone more confident, someone more experienced. Not the girl who had just been fired less than 24 hours ago for doing something she thought was simply decent. She looked up at Keanu, still stunned. Why me? She asked again, her voice quieter now. Out of everyone, why put your trust in someone like me? He didn't hesitate. Because you already lead without needing the title. You didn't wait for permission to do the right thing. That's leadership. She tried to respond, but emotion caught in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not teachers, not supervisors, certainly not Darren. I'm not sure I'm ready, she admitted. Keanu offered a small smile. No one ever is. The best people never think they are, but they show up anyway. Haley let out a slow breath. Something in her shifted, just slightly. The fear was still there, but beside it, a flicker of possibility. He stood, placing his napkin on the table and buttoning his jacket. The cafe is yours to stay in as long as you need, he said. Order something, sit for a while. You deserve the space to decide what your next step looks like. She stood too, her legs a little unsteady. Thank you, she said. He paused, then added one last thought before turning to leave. I didn't reach out to you because I felt sorry for you, Haley. I reached out because I saw someone capable of more. You've already proven what kind of person you are. She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. She just nodded, clutching the card in her hand like it was made of glass. As he walked toward the door, she felt the strangest sense of calm settling inside her. It didn't erase the fear or the uncertainty, but it made room for something else, maybe even hope. He reached the door, paused, and turned back to her with one final smile. I'll be in touch tomorrow, he said, but if I don't hear from you, I'll understand. And with that, Keanu Reeves stepped out into the Portland morning and disappeared into the quiet bustle of Alder Street. Haley remained still for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd just been. She pulled her chair back and sat down again. The coffee in front of her had gone cold, but she didn't mind. She looked at the card one more time, then carefully slid it into her purse. There was no certainty about what came next. But she had been seen, she had been chosen, and maybe, just maybe, that meant it was time to stop playing small. She didn't know what she would decide yet, but for the first time in a long while, the decision was entirely hers. The following morning, the neon sign above Harvest Hill Diner buzzed faintly in the gray Portland dawn. Haley stood on the sidewalk across the street, gripping her purse strap with both hands, staring at the building like it was something she had to conquer. She hadn't slept more than a couple of hours, and her stomach twisted in knots that wouldn't settle. But in her pocket was Keanu's card, and in her chest, something new had begun to bloom, a quiet resolve. She crossed the street. Inside, the staff was already prepping for the morning rush. The scent of bacon and fried potatoes lingered in the air. Rick stood near the grill, cracking eggs with one hand while talking to Nikki, who was loading napkin dispensers with one eye on her phone. Neither of them noticed her at first. When she walked in, Olivia, one of the newer hires, straightened slightly behind the counter. She looked at Haley with confusion, then cautious recognition. Rick was the first to say it. Haley? Nikki turned, blinking as if she wasn't sure she believed what she saw. "What are you doing here?" Haley took a deep breath and walked to the center of the dining room. She didn't raise her voice, but the way she stood, the calm in her tone, it made people turn. "I'm here because I've accepted the position of manager," she said clearly. "Effective immediately." The room went quiet. Rick looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. Nikki blinked again and crossed her arms. Olivia glanced at the others, eyes wide, then looked back at Haley with something close to relief. "I know this is unexpected," Haley continued, "but there are going to be some changes around here." She paused, letting the words settle. "First and foremost, every customer who walks through that door is going to be treated with respect. No exceptions. No judgments." Nikki scoffed. "That's rich, coming from someone who got fired 2 days ago." Haley didn't flinch. "I didn't get fired. I was pushed out for doing what was right, and I'm back because someone noticed." Rick leaned on the counter, skeptical. "And what, you're the boss now?" Haley nodded once. "Yes, I am." The silence stretched. A few of the kitchen staff exchanged glances. One of the newer busboys, Benji, gave her a small thumbs up behind Nikki's back. Haley went on. "There will be no more favoritism, no more backroom deals for the best shifts, no more whispered insults. We work together or we don't work here at all." Rick and Nikki both looked unimpressed. "I'm not here to make friends," Haley added, "but I am here to make this place better. If that's not something you're interested in, the door is right there." For a moment, no one moved. Then Olivia stepped forward and nodded. "I'm in." Haley gave her a quick, grateful smile. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and she knew not everyone in that room wanted her to succeed. But she was here now, and she wasn't backing down. The shift started like any other, but the energy was different. Haley moved behind the counter, checking on prep, making sure orders were logged correctly, and observing how the team interacted. Some employees avoided her, others gave forced nods. Rick kept his voice low, muttering to Nikki every time Haley passed by. She caught fragments, "Joke of a promotion," and "She'll crack by lunch." She didn't respond. Not yet. Haley assigned Olivia to lead the front counter and gave Benji a chance to take over table section 4, something he'd never been allowed to do under Darren. They both looked surprised but grateful. She watched them move with purpose, more focused now that someone had acknowledged their effort. By 10:30, the breakfast crowd had picked up. Tables were full, customers asked for refills faster than the kitchen could respond, and the register dinged nonstop. Haley tried to oversee everything from the floor, stepping in where needed without micromanaging. But small disruptions kept stacking up. Rick took far too long on a simple omelet order, claiming the grill was lagging. Nikki forgot to ring up a tables ticket until the guests complained. An elderly woman waved down Haley because her coffee had been cold, and it was the third one she'd been served that morning. The little things were starting to add up. Haley took a breath and stepped into the kitchen. Rick was leaning on the prep counter, phone in hand, thumbs moving quickly. "Rick," she said firmly, "we've got 7 tickets backed up." He looked up lazily. "I'm aware." "Then act like it. Move." He rolled his eyes but tossed the phone into a drawer and shuffled back to the grill. She turned to Nikki next. "And you need to stop ignoring the register. If you're overwhelmed, ask Olivia for help. But don't let orders pile up." Nikki huffed. "Don't talk to me like I'm new." "I'll talk to you like a manager talks to someone on her team," Haley replied. "You can either step up or step aside." Nikki didn't answer, but her glare lingered long after she turned away. Haley returned to the floor just in time to see a toddler spill an entire chocolate milkshake onto table 6. She moved without thinking, grabbing napkins and helping the flustered mother clean up, while the server assigned to that section lingered by the drink station, pretending not to notice. By noon, the chaos had reached its peak. Customers were complaining, orders were behind. Olivia looked stressed, trying to handle the front alone. That's when Haley pulled her hair back into a ponytail, grabbed a spare apron from the hook behind the door, and jumped in. She handed out menus, bussed tables, delivered coffee, checked tickets, refilled drinks. She moved fast and with purpose, not yelling, not snapping, just filling the gaps, like a current renoogling through broken rock. And then, as she passed by the front doors with 2 plates balanced in one hand, she saw him. Keanu Reeves had stepped into the diner. Keanu stood just inside the entrance, dressed simply, dark jeans, a black jacket, and calm eyes that swept across the restaurant without urgency. He didn't wave. He didn't call attention to himself. He just watched. Haley felt her pulse rise for a second, but she didn't stop moving. She delivered the plates she was carrying, offered a quick smile to a family at booth 8, then slipped behind the counter to check on Olivia. "You good?" she asked. Olivia looked up, sweat beading near her hairline, but she nodded. "Better now." "Good. You've got this." Duel. She turned to the next ticket, but she could still feel Keanu's presence. He stood silently near the front, not getting in the way, not announcing his reason for being there, just observing. And somehow that made everyone straighten up. Benji moved faster, clearing tables. Olivia's voice steadied as she called out pickup numbers. Even Nikki, though still scowling, stopped leaning on the counter and actually rang up a customer without comment. But Rick burned a pancake and muttered something under his breath before stepping into the walk-in cooler for longer than necessary. Haley stayed calm. She kept working. She filled in the gaps where the team faltered, smiled at customers, made sure food was hot, drinks were fresh, and receipts were correct. Every decision, every move was hers. And slowly, the chaos began to organize itself. Keanu moved to the far corner and sat at an empty booth without ordering anything. He didn't take notes, didn't speak to anyone, just watched the rhythm of the place shift under new leadership. Haley didn't walk over. She didn't need to. This wasn't about impressing him with conversation. It was about doing the work, and she knew that's what he came to see. By 1:15, the lunch rush had finally eased. The floor was cleaner, customers had smiles on their faces, and no one was complaining about cold food or delayed orders. The restaurant, for the first time in days, felt like it was breathing right again. Haley pulled off her apron and hung it behind the counter, then stepped to the front to thank Olivia and Benji for holding strong. As she passed the front door, she glanced toward Keanu's booth, but he was gone. There was no note, no goodbye, no signal of departure. But on the edge of the table, there was a folded napkin. She picked it up carefully. Inside, written in that same deliberate handwriting, was a single line. "This is what real leadership looks like." She closed the napkin and tucked it into her pocket. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was steady. The sabotage hadn't stopped. The resistance was still present, but today she had claimed her place. And the man who had trusted her to do it, he had seen exactly what she was made of. She turned back toward the counter. There was still work to be done, and she was just getting started. The buzz of conversation had faded. The chairs had been wiped down. Most of the customers were gone, and the staff was cleaning up in silence. The usual end-of-shift chatter was missing. Haley stood behind the counter, arms crossed, watching as Rick stacked dishes too loudly and Nikki scribbled something half-heartedly on the inventory list. The tension in the air was thick. She let it linger for a moment longer, then finally spoke. "Rick, Nikki, office, now." Neither of them moved immediately. Rick glanced at Nikki. Nikki gave a dramatic sigh, tossed her pen onto the counter, and walked toward the back without a word. Rick followed, slower, his body slumped with exaggerated annoyance. In the office, Haley didn't sit. She stood behind the desk with her arms still folded, her tone calm but unwavering. "I've let a lot slide today, but we're done with that now." Rick leaned against the filing cabinet and picked at a hangnail like this was beneath him. Nikki flopped into the chair across from the desk, crossed her legs, and stared out the window like she had something better to do. "You deliberately stalled orders," Haley said. You ignored customers, misfiled receipts, and made your coworkers pick up your slack, and it ends now." Rick shrugged. It was a rough day. "It wasn't a rough day, it was sabotage," she said. "You made it harder for everyone, including yourselves. Why?" Nikki rolled her eyes. "Maybe because some of us didn't vote for you to be queen." "I wasn't voted in," Haley replied. "I was asked to fix this place, and whether you like it or not, that's what I'm doing." "Fix it?" Nikki scoffed. "You think you're going to waltz in here and change everything overnight?" "No, I don't," Haley said. "But I do think I can stop this place from collapsing." Rick finally looked up. "It was fine before." "No, it wasn't," Haley said. "Customers were walking out, staff turnover was high, morale was dead. If you think that was fine, then you weren't paying attention." Nikki stood, brushing imaginary lint from her apron. "This is a waste of time." Haley's voice hardened. "Sit down." Nikki froze, shocked. Haley didn't shout, she didn't waver, she just met her with a steady stare that made Nikki hesitate for the first time all day. "You don't have to like me," Haley said, "but you do have to respect the rules. If you can't do that, this is your last shift." Nikki didn't sit. She turned toward the door with a cold smirk. "You'll regret this." Haley didn't respond. She let her go. When the door closed behind her, she turned to Rick. He hadn't moved, but his posture was different now, less cocky, more cautious. "You're not her," he said quietly. "No, I'm not," Haley replied. "But you get to decide who you are. Right now." He didn't answer. She gave him a long look, then left the door open as she walked out. The next morning, Haley arrived before the sun was fully up. The diner was still dark, but the soft flicker of the neon sign outside painted a red glow against the windows. She unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and took a slow breath. Everything smelled of bleach, coffee grounds, and the faint trace of fryer oil from the night before. It was quiet, but not peaceful. More like the hush before a storm. She flipped on the lights, one row at a time, and headed straight to the back office. She had barely opened her locker when Olivia arrived, her hair tied back in a tight braid, eyes sleepy but alert. "Morning," Olivia said softly. "Morning, thanks for coming in early," Haley replied. "No problem, you doing okay?" Haley gave her a small smile. "We'll see." She didn't have time to explain more. Rick arrived a few minutes later, walking in without a word. He tied his apron on and headed toward the prep station. He didn't smile. He didn't make eye contact. But he also didn't stall. That was something. Benji came in next, greeting everyone with a quiet, "Hey," before diving into table setups. Olivia gave Haley a quick nod across the room. So far, no signs of sabotage. By the time customers started trickling in, the team was functioning. It wasn't smooth. The atmosphere was still tight. But orders were being made on time, tables were being wiped down properly, and no one was whispering insults across the kitchen. Nikki didn't show. Haley didn't expect her to. During a lull in the mid-morning rush, she finally stepped into the back office to go over inventory numbers. She opened the drawer where Darren used to keep shift logs and paused. Tucked neatly beneath a stack of old receipts was a piece of folded paper. Not a printed schedule, not a delivery invoice, just plain white paper folded with sharp corners. She unfolded it slowly. There were no names, no threats, just a single line, typed neatly in the middle of the page. "This place isn't yours. It never will be." Haley stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. She looked around the small office, suddenly hyper-aware of every corner, every drawer, every window without a curtain. The air felt different now, not just tense, but targeted. Someone wanted her gone. Not just annoyed by her leadership, but angry, focused, intentional. She folded the note again, slid it into her jacket pocket, and sat down in the office chair, gripping the arms like the floor might shift underneath her. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just sat in silence for a moment, breathing slowly. reminding herself of who she was and why she had come back. This job wasn't about a title. It wasn't about proving anything to Rick or Nikki or anyone else. It was about doing what was right, even when someone was trying to scare her out of it. Haley stayed in the office for another 5 minutes, letting the quiet steady her nerves. She unfolded the note again and looked at the words one last time. They weren't just petty, they were personal. Whoever left it wanted her to question everything, her authority, her place, even her safety. But they had underestimated her. She tore the note cleanly in half, then again, and again. She dropped the pieces into the trash and walked out of the office with her chin lifted. The floor was running fine. Olivia waved from the register. Rick was at the grill, silently prepping orders. Benji cleared plates with focus. No one said anything when Haley walked back in, but the energy shifted slightly. She felt it. A subtle awareness. They were watching, waiting to see how she would carry herself. She moved table to table, checking on customers, asking if everything was okay, refilling coffees. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to set a tone. This place wasn't going to run on fear and hierarchy anymore. It was going to run on consistency, care, and presence. Around lunchtime, she noticed Rick moving with more purpose. He didn't talk much, but he didn't drag his feet either. He handed off plates without error. He even stepped in to help Benji when an order came out late. Haley said nothing, but she nodded once as she passed him in the kitchen. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it wasn't open resistance either. Later, during the afternoon lull, Haley caught Olivia at the drink station. "Hey," Olivia said, "I saw you head into the office earlier. Everything okay?" Haley hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Just cleaning up some old trash." Olivia smiled faintly, sensing there was more to it but respecting the boundary. "Well, if you need help tossing more of it, I'm around." "Thanks," Haley said. "That means a lot." By 4 o'clock, the shift began winding down. No major incidents, no sabotage, no more mysterious notes, at least for today. The staff was tired, but the energy was less bitter, more mechanical. It was a start. As she counted the drawer at the register, Haley let her mind drift back to the night Keanu first called her. The way his voice had sounded. Calm, certain. He hadn't chosen her because she was perfect. He'd chosen her because she cared. She still did. And if someone in this diner thought a few typed words could scare her into quitting, they didn't know who they were dealing with. This place wasn't perfect, but it was still hers to fight for. She would face the whispers. She would face the tension. She would even face whatever Darren or Nikki or anyone else tried to throw at her. Because this wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming a space and making it better than it had ever been. And she wasn't going anywhere. The first red flag came on a Wednesday morning when a regular customer, Mr. Baxter, flagged Haley down at the register. He was a retired school principal, always ordered the same thing: scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, black coffee, and always paid cash. But today he held up his receipt with a puzzled frown. "Haley, I think someone rang me up wrong," he said politely. "I ordered the usual. Menu says $8.50 with tax. But this says $10.75. Haley took the receipt and double-checked the system. The order had an added line item, extra meat. It hadn't been requested and certainly hadn't been served. "I'm so sorry," she said, voiding the charge and handing him the corrected receipt. "I'll make sure it's corrected." Mr. Baxter nodded kindly. "I trust you. Just thought you should know." Later that day, a similar situation arose with a couple at booth 3, overcharged for sides they never ordered. Then another discrepancy appeared on a carry-out order. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern. Small, scattered, but undeniably deliberate. Haley stayed late that night, sitting alone in the office with the dim overhead light buzzing faintly above her. She opened the point-of-sale system and started reviewing transaction logs from the past 2 weeks. It didn't take long to find the inconsistencies. Orders were being modified after they were closed. Tiny changes, just enough to inflate totals without drawing too much attention. Not every order, just enough to fly under the radar, enough to cause confusion and eventually undermine customer trust. She checked who had logged in during those adjustments. The same username kept appearing. Rick W. Her stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, blinking slowly. Rick had shown signs of improvement since their last conversation. He hadn't been friendly, but he hadn't been overtly difficult either. Had he just been pretending? Was this part of something larger? Haley leaned back in the chair and took a deep breath. She could feel a weight pressing against her ribs. Disappointment, anger, betrayal. And beneath that, something worse. This wasn't just internal sabotage. This felt strategic, coordinated. She stood and walked to the kitchen, where Rick was wiping down the grill in preparation for close. The last of the staff were finishing their tasks, clocking out one by one. "Rick," she said quietly, "can I see you in the office?" He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, but didn't protest. He followed her without a word. Inside, she closed the door behind them. She didn't sit. Neither did he. She turned the monitor toward him, showing the altered receipts and login records. "Do you want to explain this?" Rick's jaw tightened. His eyes scanned the screen, then shifted toward the floor. "I don't know what that is," he said quickly. Haley didn't blink. "Don't lie to me." He stayed quiet for a beat too long, then finally muttered, "Maybe someone used my login." "The system tracks device IDs," she replied calmly. "This was you." Rick looked like he wanted to argue again, but the fight in his posture began to sag. He leaned against the file cabinet, rubbing his face with both hands. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he muttered, "I didn't want to do it." Haley watched him closely. "Then why did you?" Rick dropped his hands and stared at the floor. "Because Darren told me to. He reached out the day after you came back. Said it was only a matter of time before you messed things up, and that he needed eyes on the inside. He said if I helped him, he'd put in a word for me at a different location. A promotion. A better job, one where I didn't have to answer to you." Haley felt her stomach twist. "So you changed receipts. Let customers get overcharged. Just so he could prove I wasn't fit for the job?" Rick looked up finally. "It started small. He just wanted updates. Who was working, what you were changing. Then he asked me to alter one order, just one. Said it wouldn't hurt anyone. After that, it got easier." "Easier?" Haley echoed, her voice sharp. He swallowed hard. "Not right. Just easier. And you didn't think for a second about the people getting scammed? The regulars, the families?" Her voice didn't rise, but the disappointment in it was thick. "I did," Rick said quietly. "I thought about it every time, and I hated it. But I didn't know how to stop without getting caught." Haley stared at him for a long moment. She didn't see the same smug man who had leaned on the prep table 2 weeks ago, rolling his eyes at her orders. She saw someone cornered, compromised, and now, maybe regretful. "What else has he been doing?" Rick hesitated. "He's got a few people from other locations, old friends, some still on payroll, some off. He's been asking them to leave bad reviews under fake names, call corporate with fake complaints, spread rumors you're losing control of the place." Haley felt like the floor had shifted beneath her. "He's that desperate to tank me?" Rick nodded. "He said if he couldn't keep his job, he'd make sure you didn't keep yours." The silence that followed was suffocating. Haley walked to the desk and sat down slowly, her hands gripping the edge. She had known something was wrong, but not like this, not this deep, not this dirty. "And what about Nikki?" she asked. Rick shook his head. "She was in touch with him too. I don't know how much she did, but she was part of it." Haley let out a long breath. It wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't petty revenge. This was a coordinated attempt to destroy her credibility. from the inside out. And Darren hadn't left the building when he walked out. He had just moved into the shadows. Haley sat still for a long time, her thoughts racing. She stared at the monitor, at the list of altered receipts, the login history, the pattern. Darren hadn't just wanted her out. He wanted to rot the place from the inside. Every delayed order, every overcharge, every fake review was a string he had pulled, waiting for it all to collapse on her. She turned back to Rick. "Why tell me this now?" His face was pale. "Because I didn't think it would go this far. I figured he'd back off once you got the hang of things. But when he asked me to crash the system next week during dinner service, I realized I couldn't keep doing it." Haley's heart skipped. "He wanted you to crash the system?" Rick nodded. "Shut down the terminals, mess with receipts, fake a refund, enough to get customers angry. He wanted chaos. He wanted someone to film it." She stood, the weight of it all pressing on her chest. She could almost feel Darren's presence, like a ghost, still walking the halls of the diner he once ruled. But now she knew. And now she had proof. She took a breath and steadied herself. "We're going to fix this." Rick looked unsure. "Even if we do, he's still out there. He's still pulling strings." "I know," she said. "But he doesn't get to win just because he hides behind other people." Rick looked down. "I'm sorry, Haley." She nodded. "Sorry doesn't undo what happened, but it's a start." He left the office without being told, shoulders slumped. Haley waited until the door clicked shut behind him, then opened her phone and began typing. She drafted a full incident report. Dates, details, screenshots of the transaction logs. She attached it all in an email to Keanu's private contact address, the one he had used to follow up after their first meeting. The subject line read, "Urgent, coordinated sabotage from former manager Darren." She hit send, leaned back in her chair, and let out a long, tired breath. The next morning, she walked into the diner with a new kind of focus. Rick was already at the grill, quiet but alert. Olivia greeted her with a warm smile. Benji handed her a fresh coffee without being asked. The shift ran cleaner. Customers smiled more. The tension was still there, but thinner now, like a storm had passed and only clouds remained. After the breakfast rush, she stepped into the office and opened her locker. There was no note waiting this time, only silence. And silence, for now, was enough. She knew Darren wasn't finished. But now she had his playbook. And she had Rick's confession. What she didn't have in years of management experience, she now carried in grit, clarity, and truth. He wanted to break her from the shadows. But she wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. She was ready to fight in it. And win. Haley sat in the quiet of her apartment that evening, staring at the screen of her laptop. The diner's transaction logs were still open from earlier, columns of dates, times, and order numbers blinking in neat rows. Her email to Keanu had been sent hours ago, and still there was no response. Not even a read receipt. She stood, paced once across the room, then finally grabbed her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found his name. Just K in her phone. She stared at it for a long time before pressing call. It rang once, twice, then picked up. "Haley," Keanu said, his voice calm and steady like it always was. "Hi," she breathed, relief flooding her chest. "I wasn't sure if you'd answer. I was waiting for your call." His answer sent a chill up her spine. "So, you saw the email?" "I did, and I'm not surprised," he said. "I've been watching this unfold for a while." She sat back down on the couch. "You knew Darren was still involved?" "I suspected it, but I needed someone inside to confirm it." Haley blinked. "You were using me?" "No," Keanu replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "I was trusting you. There's a difference. I couldn't act without evidence. Now I have it." She exhaled slowly. "He's not acting alone." "I know," Keanu said. "He's part of a network. Not official, not documented, but real. Former managers, a few corporate veterans, even a supplier or two. They've been sabotaging locations when they don't get their way. Quietly, systematically. Why? Haley asked, stunned. What do they gain? Power. Leverage. Revenge, he replied. They can't stand that we're moving toward fairness and transparency, so they're trying to burn it down from the inside, and now we know how they're doing it. Haley was silent for a moment. Then she said, "What do you want me to do?" There was a pause. Then Keanu's voice came through, measured and clear. "I want you to help me finish this. I need a full picture, emails, login data, surveillance logs, anything you can pull from your system. And I need it discreetly. No one can know what you're doing." Haley nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "You're asking me to spy." "I'm asking you to document the truth," Keanu said. "And I know you're the only person I can trust to do it right." She leaned back into the couch and closed her eyes for a moment. It was a lot. More than she'd ever expected to be involved in when she took the job. But this wasn't about one restaurant anymore. This was bigger. This was about every branch, every worker, and she was already in it. "Okay," she said, "I'm in." Keanu didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. Instead, he said, "There's a folder I'll send you, instructions, a data structure we're using to track manipulation. It's not complicated, but you'll need to be thorough." "I will be," she said. "I know," he replied. "You always are." Later that night, Haley opened the encrypted folder Keanu had sent. Inside were spreadsheets, file structures, timestamp instructions, and a short guide on extracting system logs from the point-of-sale software. She recognized most of it from her time in the office. The instructions weren't complicated, but they were incredibly specific. The goal wasn't just to prove something was off. The goal was to build a case that could be taken to corporate or a courtroom. She cleared her table, plugged in her laptop, and got to work. The diner's remote access login still worked from her apartment. She tapped into the back office server and pulled receipts for the last 30 days. As she scanned each one, she color-coded everything suspicious. Order modifications, odd timing between entries, logged discounts that were never communicated. Patterns began to form. Most of the changes were small, some were barely noticeable. But once grouped together, they painted a clear picture of targeted manipulation. Haley dug deeper, checking which user IDs were attached to each edit. Rick's were common. So were two generic logins she didn't recognize. One was labeled Shift Lead 2 and another just Temp User. She flagged both and exported them into Keanu's spreadsheet. Around midnight, her eyes burned from staring at the screen. But she didn't stop. She opened the email server used for interstore memos and searched by Darren's old address. The system had deactivated him, but fragments remained. Drafts, forwarded messages, threads he had once copied other managers on. She found one forwarded thread titled, "Performance Concerns HHD Portland." It had been sent to a former employee 3 days before she had been fired. The message was brief, but telling. "She doesn't fit our culture. Too soft. Won't last. May need some encouragement to exit sooner." Her stomach turned. She took a screenshot and saved it. At 1:37 a.m., she discovered something she hadn't expected. Notes in the system tagged "Invisible Comments." These were never shown on printed orders or receipts. They were meant for internal staff only, often used for kitchen timing or allergy warnings, but some of them were different. She found 2 invisible comments from the last week that said, "Let this one sit," and "Mess this up." Both linked to Rick's login. One was tied to an order that had gone cold. The customer had walked out. She flagged them both. By 2:15 a.m., she had built a file that stretched across 4 departments: front of house, kitchen, IT access, and payroll inconsistencies. She logged it, zipped the folder, and uploaded everything to the shared drive Keanu had linked. Before shutting her laptop, she typed a short message. Phase 1 complete. If they're doing this here, they're doing it elsewhere. I'll keep going. She hit send. Then she leaned back in her chair, drained but sharp. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about protecting every other worker like her who had been silenced, pushed out, or ignored because they didn't play dirty. Darren thought he could scare her into quitting. But instead, he had lit the fuse on something much bigger. And she was just getting started. Haley stood in the middle of the dining room, arms folded tightly across her chest. It was 8:12 a.m., an hour before opening. The windows were still dark, the chairs not yet pulled down from the tables. But every employee had been called in early, no exceptions. Rick leaned against the counter, eyes low. Olivia sat near the front, hands folded, nervously glancing around. Benji clutched a mop, uncertain whether to stand at attention or try to vanish. Nikki was absent. Haley took a slow breath, then stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know this isn't a normal start to the day, but what's been happening here hasn't been normal either." Murmurs passed quietly through the group. She didn't wait for silence. "I'm going to be very direct. There's been sabotage happening inside this diner. Orders altered, customers overcharged, fake reviews posted. And we now know it wasn't just carelessness, it was deliberate. More shifting." Olivia blinked, confused. Rick stared at his shoes. "I have logs, digital footprints, screen captures," Haley continued. "I also know this was not one person acting alone. This was part of something much bigger, started by someone who used to manage this place. There was no need to say Darren's name, yet everyone already knew who she meant. Some of you may have been pressured, others may have been bribed. I'm not here to shame you, but I am giving you a chance, right now, to be honest." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Benji stepped forward, his voice quiet. I didn't change anything, but he told me to let some orders sit, said it would teach her a lesson. I didn't think it was serious." Haley nodded. "Thank you for saying that." Another voice came from the back. Rosa, one of the weekend servers, raised a hand slowly. "I wrote a review under a fake name. He said it was just for a corporate audit. I didn't know what it was for." "You weren't the only one," Haley said. "And that's okay. You're here now." A third hand rose. Then a fourth. One by one, people began admitting the small things they'd done, passing along notes, delaying food, repeating customer complaints that weren't real. Most of them hadn't known the full picture. Some had just wanted to keep their jobs. Others were promised better ones elsewhere. Haley listened to each confession without interrupting. She wrote nothing down. This wasn't about building a case now. It was about clearing the air. Then Olivia stood. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice clear. "But I saw how some of you treated her when she started, the way people talked when she turned her back. I didn't say anything. And maybe I should have." Haley looked at her and gave a small nod. Before she could speak again, the front door creaked open. Everyone turned. In walked Keanu Reeves, quiet, steady, dressed in a dark button-down and jeans. He said nothing, but his presence shifted the room. He walked to the side and leaned against the wall, folding his arms, waiting. Then, before anyone could address him, the door opened again, and Darren walked in. Smug, bold, like he still owned the place. The moment Darren stepped into the diner, a hush fell over the room. His presence was like cold air slithering into a warm space, unwelcome but commanding attention. He wore a blazer too sharp for the hour, and a smirk that had no place among the people he had tried to ruin. "Well," he said, scanning the crowd like a king returning to his court, "looks like the gang's all here." Haley didn't flinch. She stepped forward, planting herself between Darren and the staff behind her. "You're not welcome here, Darren." He raised an eyebrow. That's funny, considering I built this place. You really think a handful of waiters and line cooks could keep it running without someone who knows what they're doing? Rick straightened from the wall. We are keeping it running, and you weren't building anything, you were tearing it down. Darren's gaze flicked to Rick, briefly surprised. Well, look who finally grew a spine. Keanu's voice broke the tension. Calm, clear, impossible to ignore. She has already told them, Darren. Darren froze. His eyes locked on Keanu, the first sign of doubt flickering behind his cocky expression. You, he said, voice faltering. Of course. You couldn't just let it go, could you? Keanu stepped forward slowly. You used your position to manipulate people, to poison a system meant to be fair. You bribed employees, sabotaged the business, faked complaints, all to cover for the fact that you were no longer needed. Darren's face turned red. Needed? I held this place together for years. I made it profitable. And you come in with your pretty speeches about kindness and culture. Like that's enough? It's not enough. No, Keanu said softly. But character is. Darren turned toward Haley, the mask slipping. You think you've won something? You? You wouldn't last a month without my name off the books keeping things in check. I'm still here, she replied. You're not. And I will be, he sneered. Because this isn't over. Corporate won't listen to some former waitress playing dress-up. They'll listen to numbers, to people like me. Keanu stepped beside Haley now, his voice firm. You're right. They don't always listen to words. But they do listen to evidence. And we have it. Every login, every tampered receipt, every fake review, it's all documented. You've been tracked. Darren's mouth opened, then closed again. That confidence he wore like armor began to crack. For the first time, he seemed aware of the eyes around him. Not afraid, not loyal, but disgusted. Olivia spoke from the side. You tried to ruin her, but we see who you really are now. Others murmured in agreement. The tide had shifted. Darren wasn't feared anymore. He was exposed. Keanu looked at Haley and nodded. She stepped forward one last time. This isn't just about me. It's about every person you stepped on to keep your power. That ends now. Darren didn't answer. He looked at the people around him. At the silence he once controlled, now used against him. And for the first time, he walked out without a word. No applause followed, just a long breath of freedom that everyone could finally feel. The cleanup had begun, and it started with the truth. The silence in the diner after Darren stormed in lingered like fog. But Haley didn't retreat. She stood tall, her back straight, her hands calm at her sides. Keanu remained a step behind, saying nothing, his trust in her as clear as sunlight. Darren, trying to recapture control, scoffed and let out a low chuckle. Look at this circus, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. You're all so proud of yourselves. You think kindness and little speeches will save you? Please. You're just a trend, Haley. A pretty face put here to look good for investors. He walked toward her slowly, trying to reclaim his familiar pace, that bullying rhythm of someone used to intimidating a room. You weren't picked because of talent. You were picked because you smile nice and keep your head down. You're a PR stunt. That's all. Haley didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or return his venom. Instead, she stepped to the table near the front and picked up a thick manila folder. Without a word, she held it high for everyone to see, then let it fall open on the table. Pages of printed logs, screenshots, messages, and time-stamped edits spilling out like a wave. You thought you were breaking me, she said, steady and unwavering. But all you did was reveal how afraid you were. Darren blinked. She continued. You used people, bribed them, lied, because you couldn't stand someone doing things differently. You couldn't imagine someone leading with respect instead of fear. But I'm still here, and you? You're a ghost with a key card that doesn't work anymore. A low, stunned silence followed. Darren tried to laugh, but the sound came out strained. "You think these papers scare me?" he said. "This is nothing. It's speculation. You think corporate's going to take the word of a girl who was working tables a month ago?" Keanu finally stepped forward. He didn't say anything at first, just reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a single folded document. He handed it to Haley, who opened it carefully. The heading read, "Internal Franchise Oversight Memorandum. Memorandum approved." Haley's voice carried the words clearly, her hands not shaking. "As of this morning, Darren Keller is hereby banned from any and all franchise properties under the Harvest Hill Restaurant Group banner, effective immediately. No access, no employment, no contact." She looked up. "It's done." Darren's face flushed. He tried to hide it with another grin, but the smirk barely formed before fading. His eyes darted from the folder on the table to the document in her hand, then back to the staff now standing together. Rick, Benji, Rosa, Olivia, all of them watching, none of them on his side. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "You don't get to erase me with paperwork. I built this place. You don't get to push me out." "No one pushed you out," Haley replied. "You walked out when you chose lies over integrity," Keanu added. "And we just closed the door behind you." Darren's voice cracked as he tried to bluff. "I'll appeal this. I'll go to the top." "You already did," Haley said. "And the top said no." Darren's breath caught for just a second, barely noticeable, but Haley saw it. The air around him shifted. He looked smaller now, still dressed like he was in charge, but that air of invincibility had evaporated. He turned toward Keanu, grasping for leverage. "You, of all people, should understand. Loyalty. Legacy. I was here when you bought this place. I kept it running when no one else wanted to touch it." Keanu met his gaze, calm but resolute. "And I hoped you'd rise with it. I gave you time, trust, resources. What you did with them, that was your choice." Darren took a step forward, lowering his voice, trying to regain even a shred of ground. "She doesn't know what she's doing, man. This whole thing is a mess. Service is still slow. The staff's divided. You really think she's ready to run this place?" Keanu didn't respond immediately. He looked toward Haley, then to the staff behind her. Olivia standing near the register, Rick watching silently from the back line, even Benji folding a rag with something like pride in his posture. Then he spoke. "She's already doing it." Darren's lips pressed together tightly. He looked around, as if searching for even one nod of agreement, some fragment of doubt he could latch onto. But all he found was quiet resistance. Not hatred, not cruelty, just people who were done with him. The final blow came not from Keanu or Haley, but from Olivia. "You tried to convince us she wasn't enough," she said softly. "But you're the one who needed a room full of secrets to stay powerful. She's not perfect, but she's honest. That's what we needed." Darren's jaw tightened. He pointed a stiff finger toward Haley. "You're going to regret this, all of you." Haley didn't blink. "We already regretted trusting you. Now we're moving on." He turned toward the door, and for a moment it looked like he'd say something else. But nothing came. He walked out, shoulders a little lower than when he'd arrived, the echo of his shoes on the tile the only sound left behind. The moment the door clicked shut, the room remained quiet. Haley slowly exhaled, her hands finally dropping to her sides. She looked down at the folder on the table, then at the staff now gathered closer than ever before. Keanu gave her a nod. It wasn't a grand gesture, it was something deeper. Approval, respect, and quiet pride. Haley turned to the team. "I know this has been a lot, and I know trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But if you're still willing to work beside me, I'm ready to work harder than ever to earn it." Rick shifted slightly. "You've already earned it." Benji nodded. "Let's just get back to doing the job right." Olivia smiled. "We've got your back." No applause, no cheering, Just the quiet agreement of people finally free from fear, of a team no longer manipulated, but united. And for the first time since she walked into the diner as a manager, Haley felt what it meant to truly lead. Not from the top, but from right beside them. The hours after Darren left passed like the quiet after a storm, still uncertain and filled with the weight of everything that had come before. The air in the diner no longer carried tension, but it didn't feel light just yet. No one said much. Everyone went back to their stations, wiping down surfaces, checking prep lists, and resetting the dining room for the day ahead. But Haley didn't want to rush back into normalcy. Not yet. She stood in the center of the floor, glancing from face to face. She knew not everyone had fully switched sides. Some still had doubts. Some were just waiting to see which way the wind would blow next. And others, quietly, had been hoping for this change all along. She tapped her pen against a notepad and made a decision. Over the next 2 hours, she called each team member into the back office, one by one. No scolding, no lectures, just quiet, direct conversations. Rick came in first. He looked worn down but clear-eyed. Haley didn't open with accusations. She simply asked, "Where do you stand now?" Rick swallowed. "I was wrong. I let Darren get in my head. I thought backing him meant job security. I didn't realize how far it had gone until it was too late." Haley leaned forward slightly. "I appreciate your honesty, but I need to know, can I trust you to help fix what you helped break?" Rick nodded. "Yeah, whatever it takes." "Then show me," she said. "On the floor, in the kitchen, every shift." Rick stood up straighter. "I will." Next came Rosa. She'd always been quiet, always kept her head down, but today she looked different, more confident. "I want to stay," she said without prompting. "I believe in what you're doing. I've just never felt like I could speak up before." "You just did," Haley replied with a small smile. "And that's a good start." A few of the talks didn't go as smoothly. One server, Bryce, deflected every question and rolled his eyes at her notes. Another, Monica, made a half-hearted defense of Darren's methods, claiming things got done faster when people were scared to mess up. Haley didn't argue. She simply thanked them, let them walk out of the office, and by the end of the day, quietly handed both of them their final checks. If the diner was going to thrive, it couldn't be half-healed. The infection had to be fully removed. But for every person she let go, another stepped forward, ready to do more. Kyle, the shy dishwasher, barely made eye contact when he stepped into the office. His hands fidgeted in his apron, and he sat on the edge of the chair like he didn't belong. Haley opened her notebook and looked him in the eye. "I've seen your work. You're early every day. You check on everyone else's stations when you finish your own, and Rick told me you helped redo the prep sheet when the system glitched last week." Kyle blinked, surprised. Yeah, I just wanted to help. You want to do more?" He nodded quickly. Haley slid a form across the desk. "Starting next week, you're training as a line cook, full pay bump. We'll give you the hours and the tools. You've earned it." Kyle stared at the form, then looked up with wide, quiet gratitude. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know." Haley continued the meetings, patient and thoughtful. By the time she called Olivia into the office, there was a sense of momentum building. Like the walls that once echoed Darren's dominance were finally absorbing something new. Olivia entered with a cautious smile. "You wanted to see me?" Haley nodded and gestured to the chair across from her. "I did. I've been watching you closely these last few weeks. You stepped up when no one asked you to. You speak when others hesitate. And during all this chaos, you've stayed focused on the work." Olivia looked surprised, then let out a quiet laugh. "Honestly, I've just been trying not to drown." "You've done more than that," Haley said, "and I want to ask something of you, if you're ready." Olivia leaned forward. "Anything?" Haley handed her a neatly folded packet. "Assistant manager. Official offer. I think the team already sees you that way. I just want to make it real. Olivia's eyes widened. Wait, really? I mean, I've only been here a few months. So have I, Haley replied with a smile. But it's not about time, it's about trust, effort, and heart. You've shown all three. Olivia opened the packet with trembling fingers. I don't even know what to say. Just say yes when you're ready. She did. That afternoon, the team looked different, not just in structure, but in energy. Rick had already restocked the dry storage without being asked. Kyle was in the kitchen, shadowing Benji, watching carefully as he chopped vegetables with a precision that mirrored the care Kyle had once given to washing dishes. Rosa greeted each customer with warmth, no longer hiding behind a clipboard. Even the dining room itself felt more alive, brighter, more open, as though the building itself had exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Haley didn't make any grand announcements, no plaques or speeches. Instead, she walked the floor, thanked people by name, checked on meals, and smiled at the customers who had quietly returned after weeks of inconsistency. She caught Keanu at the back booth, unnoticed by most of the staff. "You stuck around," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I wanted to see what you'd build." She glanced across the diner. "It's still early. There's a lot more to fix." He nodded. "And you're exactly the kind of person who will." Haley studied him for a moment. "Do you ever regret not stepping in sooner?" He shook his head gently. "Sometimes the right people just need the space to rise." She leaned back and took in the view. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, a diner finally beginning to heal. "You think they'll forget what happened?" she asked quietly. "They won't," Keanu said. "But they'll remember what came after even more." She smiled, feeling the truth of that settle in her chest. The new chapter wasn't about erasing the past. It was about rewriting the future. With truth, with effort, and with the people who chose to stand beside her when it mattered most. It had been 3 weeks since Darren had walked out for the last time, but the transformation inside Harvest Hill Diner felt like a lifetime in the making. The change was visible the moment someone stepped through the doors. There was laughter from the kitchen, not shouting. The sound of plates clinking was rhythmic, not chaotic. And the smell? Fresh biscuits, seared bacon, and roasted vegetables. Spoke of care, not corners cut. That morning, Haley arrived early, as always, but today wasn't just any day. Today, Keanu was returning, and he wasn't coming alone. He had quietly let her know the night before. No pressure, no dramatics, just a gentle heads up. Bringing a few folks from the board, just be yourself. Haley had smiled at the message, but her nerves hadn't stopped fluttering since she read it. She stepped into the kitchen to find Kyle already prepping potatoes with steady hands. Olivia was reviewing the morning assignments near the server station, jotting names and notes on the chalkboard. Rick was humming under his breath while restocking condiments. Everything was humming, just like it should. At 10:43 a.m., the door chimed, and Keanu walked in. Clean-cut, simple gray blazer, and the kind of presence that naturally drew attention without needing to ask for it. But this time, 3 others followed behind him, 2 men and a woman in sharp but relaxed business attire. Their eyes scanned the space with interest, not judgment. Haley took one deep breath, smoothed her apron, and approached with a confident smile. "Good morning," she greeted, holding out her hand first to the woman. "Haley Jensen," she added, "manager of this location." The woman shook her hand warmly. "Marla Tran, director of brand operations. Good to meet you in person." The 2 men introduced themselves next. Ben Goldman from finance and Liam Knox from regional development. Their presence wasn't just ceremonial. These were the people who decided where the company grew, who stayed in leadership, and which stores made the cut. Keanu hung back slightly, letting Haley take the lead. It was her moment now. "Would you like a tour before we sit down?" she offered, her voice even. "Absolutely," Marla replied. We've been hearing good things. We'd love to see it in action." Haley led them around with quiet professionalism. She didn't oversell anything. She didn't throw big numbers around. She showed them the real work. In the kitchen, Kyle nodded politely as he sliced onions with precision. "Haley's been promoted from dishwasher," Haley said. "Hardest working guy back here." Kyle flushed slightly but kept working. The board members smiled. She guided them past the service counter where Olivia was speaking with an elderly couple about their order. Olivia joined a few months ago. Now she's assistant manager, helps coordinate shifts and handles customer feedback. "She seems sharp," Liam commented. "She is," Haley replied with pride. They walked past the dining floor, which was nearly full now. Happy chatter buzzed across tables. No one was waiting for service. Plates were already arriving hot. A small boy with syrup on his face waved at the group as they passed. The board noticed every detail. And Keanu, he hadn't said a word since arriving. But he watched everything. Not the performance, the people, the atmosphere, the way his quiet investment had turned into something real. Haley led the group to a back corner booth that had been reserved in advance. Olivia discreetly brought over a carafe of fresh coffee and a tray of pastries from the morning bake: blueberry scones, cinnamon twists, and buttery croissants. Haley offered a seat to each guest, then stood at the end of the table, posture tall but not stiff. "Any questions?" she asked, folding her hands calmly in front of her. Ben Goldman leaned forward, scanning the room behind her. "This place had one of the lowest ratings in the region 2 months ago. You've done a lot in a short time." Haley didn't blink. "By listening. By showing the staff that they mattered as much as the customers, and by removing the people who treated this like a stepping stone instead of a responsibility." Marla tilted her head thoughtfully. "And what's been the hardest part?" Haley paused, considering. "Changing the culture. It's not just about making things run smoothly. It's about helping people believe again, in each other, in their own work. That takes more than a checklist." Liam smiled. "That's exactly what we hope to hear." The conversation shifted into specifics: scheduling systems, customer feedback, order timing metrics. Haley answered everything clearly and without pretense. She didn't inflate numbers or make excuses. She spoke plainly about where they had improved and where they still had room to grow. When the questions tapered off, Keanu finally spoke. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. "She's done more than turn this diner around. She's redefined what leadership looks like in our company." Haley blinked, startled by the sudden praise. But Keanu's eyes were steady. "There are managers with more experience, longer resumes," he continued, "but very few with this kind of integrity, resilience, and compassion." He glanced toward the team, who were peeking around corners, trying to act casual while obviously eavesdropping. "I didn't ask her to be perfect. I asked her to care, and she did." The board members nodded silently. There was no need to say more. As they rose to leave, Marla reached out and shook Haley's hand again, this time with both of hers. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing," she said. "You've set a new standard." Ben and Liam offered brief but meaningful farewells, then followed Keanu toward the door. He paused before leaving and looked back at Haley. "You did this," he said quietly, "and I'm proud of you." She nodded, emotion rising in her throat. "Thank you for believing in me. You made it easy." With that, he turned and exited into the bright Portland morning, the chime on the diner door echoing in his wake. The moment he left, the staff emerged from the shadows, buzzing with quiet excitement. Olivia grinned and gave Haley a playful nudge. "Well, how'd we do?" Haley smiled, her shoulders finally easing. "We didn't just do well, we made history." And as the next wave of customers came through the door, the team moved with practiced rhythm, no longer just co-workers, but a family built on trust, effort, and the kind of leadership that didn't just talk. It showed up and stood strong. Just like Haley. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the parking lot as the last of the board members pulled away in a sleek black SUV. Haley stood just outside the diner's entrance, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the day slowly leave her shoulders. It had been one of the most important days of her life, and somehow it had gone better than she dared hope. Keanu stood quietly by his car, arms folded, leaning against the door. He didn't call her over, didn't wave her down. He just waited. She walked toward him, still tying up her apron behind her back. "You're not gone yet?" she asked with a tired smile. He returned the smile. "Didn't want to leave without one more conversation." She stopped a few feet away. "Everything okay?" Keanu opened the car door and gestured for her to step inside. "Ride with me for a minute?" He hesitated for only a second before nodding. She stepped in, closed the door, and sat still, the hum of the engine already low and steady. It was quiet, private, the first moment of peace she'd had all day. Keanu didn't start driving. He just sat for a beat, looking out the windshield, gathering his words. "You've done something rare here, Haley," he said. "You didn't just fix a store, you transformed it." She looked down at her lap. "I just wanted it to work. For everyone. And that's exactly why it worked." He reached into the center console and pulled out a slim manila folder. He handed it to her slowly, not rushing the moment. She opened it and scanned the top page. Her eyes darted over the words. Assistant Regional Operations Liaison. 5 locations. Oversight. Travel included. Training responsibilities. Full benefits. Haley's breath caught. "Is this?" Keanu nodded. "They want you to oversee 5 more locations. Struggling ones. Places like this used to be." Her fingers tightened around the edges of the folder. "But I'm not? This is huge. I've never—" "You didn't ask for power," he said softly. "That's why you're ready for it." She looked over at him, disbelief swimming in her expression. "You think I can really do this?" "I know you can. You've already done the hardest part." Healer turned her gaze back to the page. 5 locations, each with its own staff, its own set of problems, its own set of personalities and wounds to heal. It was intimidating, it was thrilling, it was more responsibility than she had ever imagined for herself. "What about this diner?" she asked quietly. "You'll still be based here," Keanu explained, "but you'll help guide the other locations, set standards, share what you've learned, lead new managers. This place will be the model, and you'll be the voice behind it." She sat back in the seat, folder in her lap, heart racing. She thought of Kyle in the kitchen, Olivia behind the counter, Rick prepping trays with quiet focus. She thought of the version of herself who'd been fired not so long ago for helping a stranger. It felt like a lifetime had passed. "Can I take a day?" she asked. Keanu smiled. "Take 2. But just so you know, I already told them you were the only choice." Haley let the folder rest in her lap as she stared out the window. The world outside looked the same. Cars passing, a mother pushing a stroller along the sidewalk, sunlight warming the diner's brick exterior. But everything inside her had shifted. "I never wanted any of this," she admitted. "Not the power, the spotlight. I wanted a job I could be proud of. I wanted to come home at night feeling like I made something better." Keanu nodded slowly. "That's exactly why they want you. You didn't chase authority. You earned trust." She shook her head lightly, processing. "It's a lot." "It is," he agreed. "But you've already proven something more important than experience. You lead with principle, with care. And those 5 stores? They don't need a perfect manager. They need someone who sees people." Haley turned toward him. "And what if I fail?" Keanu smiled. "Then you learn. Then you adjust. But I don't think you will." The certainty in his voice wasn't loud, but it rooted something deep inside her. A quiet confidence. A belief that had started as a spark and now felt like steady flame. She opened the folder again, reading slower this time. Travel reimbursements. A support team. A training phase. It wasn't a sink-or-swim deal. It was a real investment in her, and if she accepted, she wouldn't be alone. "I'll need help," she said quietly. "You'll have it," Keanu assured her. "From me, from the board, from Olivia if you want to promote her further. You'll be able to choose your support team." She chuckled under her breath. "I never even imagined a support team." "Well," he said with a grin, "you've got one." A brief silence followed. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Finally, Haley closed the folder and placed it on the dashboard. "I'll say yes. I'm scared, but I'll say yes." Keanu looked at her with quiet pride. "That's all I needed to hear." She looked over at him. "Why me, though? Out of everyone? You could have picked someone with degrees, years of corporate experience." He shrugged gently. "I saw the way you looked at customers, like they weren't transactions, like they mattered. That's rare. And when you got knocked down, you didn't ask for someone to fix it for you. You stood back up and did the hard part." Haley sat in stillness, letting the moment sink in. Then she smiled. A real one, full of something deeper than relief. "Fulfillment. I guess I'd better start thinking about how to balance 6 stores now," she said. Keanu grinned. "Start by getting some sleep." She laughed. "That might actually be the hardest part." They both stepped out of the car, the evening breeze cool on their skin. Haley clutched the folder as if it carried more than papers, like it held her future. In many ways it did. Keanu opened his door, but paused to look at her one last time. "Whatever happens next," he said, "don't forget what got you here." "I won't," she promised. As his car pulled away, Haley stood in the parking lot with the folder still in hand, the weight of her new future pressing into her palm like a vow. Not a reward, a responsibility. And she was ready to carry it. The morning came slower than usual. Haley stood outside the front doors of Harvest Hill Diner, keys in hand, watching the sky turn from soft blue to gold. Her final shift as manager was today, her last time unlocking these doors, greeting the morning crew, checking the specials board, and walking the floor with her coffee in hand. She stepped inside quietly. The bell above the door gave its familiar chime, and for a moment she didn't move. She simply stood still, absorbing the silence before the noise of breakfast orders, running water, and sizzling pans would take over. The place looked the same, but it felt different, not just because of her title, but because of everything she'd been through here. Every stain on the counter, every chip on the edge of a table. She knew them. They were part of her story now. She walked slowly past the first booth near the window, the one where she used to sit for 5 minutes before her shift, sipping coffee and thinking about her day. A week after she was fired, she had sat there again, this time stunned by Keanu's offer. That booth had seen her fear, her doubt, and her resolve. The second booth reminded her of the time a single father and his daughter came in during a snowstorm. They'd barely spoken to each other. She had brought them 2 hot chocolates and smiled. Later, the father had quietly thanked her, said it was the first time in weeks his daughter had smiled. Haley had never forgotten that. Every table told a story. The round one in the corner where a group of teachers met every Friday after school. The high top by the counter where teenagers gathered after football games. The counter seat near the register where a lonely older man named Bruce sat every Thursday like clockwork, always ordering the same thing: eggs over medium, hash browns crispy, black coffee. She passed through the kitchen where Kyle was already chopping onions. He looked up and gave a sheepish smile. "Morning, boss," he said. "Just Haley today," she replied with a smile. "Tomorrow, someone else takes the reins." "You sure you don't want to stay?" he asked, half jokingly. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got this. Just don't forget to double-check the burners." He grinned. "Always." She made her way through the staff hallway, stopping to peek into the storage room, then the office that had once been Darren's, and later hers. The chair still creaked when you sat down, the desk drawer still stuck if you didn't pull it just right. It was strange to feel so connected to furniture, but it wasn't the objects. It was what they represented: growth, struggle, ownership. By the time lunch rolled around, word had spread through the diner. Staff whispered and smiled, casting glances her way, clearly plotting something. But Haley didn't pry. She just kept moving, helping Olivia reorganize a catering request, answering a customer question, checking in with Rick on inventory. Every time she passed someone, she took a moment. With Olivia, she paused near the server station. "You're going to be great at this," Haley told her. "Just keep listening. People tell you what they need if you're patient." Olivia blinked a few times and nodded, clearly holding back emotion. "You taught me how to see people, not just serve them." In the kitchen, Haley caught Rick scraping down the grill, lost in his usual rhythm. She tapped the counter gently. He looked up, surprised. "Thought you'd be halfway out the door by now." "Not yet," she said. "Just wanted to say thank you. I know it hasn't always been easy between us, but I saw how hard you worked these past few weeks." Rick gave a half smile and wiped his hands on his apron. "You gave me a second chance. That counts for more than you know." Haley nodded and moved on, stopping at the dish pit, where Kyle was now rinsing trays. She leaned over the edge of the metal divider. "You've come a long way," she said. He turned with water on his gloves, brow damp from steam. "Yeah? You're not just a dishwasher anymore," she said. "You're the backbone, and next week you'll be cooking Sunday brunch. I saw your schedule." Kyle beamed. "Seriously?" "Seriously. And don't be afraid to own it. You've got a talent." The rest of the shift moved fast. A steady stream of orders, the occasional impatient customer. A child spilled orange juice, and Haley crouched beside them with a towel like she always had. No one treated her differently, and she liked it that way. Then, just before the end of the day, Olivia pulled her aside. "Break room," she said with a smile that gave away nothing. "Now." Haley followed, stepping through the familiar hallway once more. She pushed open the door and froze. The room had been transformed. String lights were hung loosely along the top cabinets. A handmade banner stretched across the back wall, reading in large, uneven letters, "Thank you, Haley." The small table in the center was covered in snacks, party cups, and a dozen perfectly imperfect cupcakes, each with a swirl of frosting. Kyle stepped forward, cheeks red. "I made them," he said quickly. "They're vanilla, with caramel centers. You always talked about caramel." Haley laughed, already tearing up. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you say," Kyle said with a shrug. "You're the only person who really talked to me when I started." One by one, the staff stepped forward with cards, small gifts, and hugs. Rick handed her a handwritten recipe he'd used for years. Olivia gave her a notebook with a note on the inside cover. "For all the people you'll help next." The break room buzzed with quiet emotion. No grand speeches, just warmth, just gratitude. Haley stood in the center of it all, clutching a cupcake, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already said it," Olivia replied. "Every day you showed up." They lingered a while longer, sharing laughs and stories and memories. Then, as the party died down and the staff began returning to their closing duties, Haley stood at the break room door and looked back one last time. It wasn't a farewell party, not really. It was a beginning, a mark of what they had built and what they would continue to build. Later, as she turned off the lights and stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sun was dipping low behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose. Haley Jensen locked the diner door one final time and held the keys in her palm for a long moment. Then, slowly, she slipped them into the drop slot and walked away. Not with regret, but with purpose. The sky over Seattle was blanketed in a gray mist as Haley stepped out of the cab, her boots touching down on the damp pavement outside the modest two-story diner. It was one of 5 under her care now, and this one, Silver Fork Cafe, was known internally as the most difficult. Complaints, high turnover, poor reviews, and a manager on suspension. She stood for a moment in the light drizzle, just observing the faded awning, the neon sign flickering weakly above the door. It reminded her of something, of a memory not long past. Her first day walking back into Harvest Hill, unsure of herself but determined to bring change. She pushed the door open. The bell overhead rang once. No one looked up. The atmosphere inside was heavy, not chaotic, but lifeless, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, just worn out. The booths along the left side were half filled with tired-looking customers. A man tapped his coffee mug impatiently. A woman by the window tried 3 times to get someone's attention. No one came. Behind the counter, 2 servers stood leaning against the coffee station, half engaged in conversation, half scrolling through their phones. One of them, a woman in her 20s with bleached blonde hair and a frown carved deep into her face, glanced up as Haley walked in, but said nothing. Haley didn't announce herself. She didn't flash her badge or mention her new title. Instead, she quietly took a seat at a corner booth, the same way Keanu had, not long ago, at her own diner. The vinyl seat creaked as she settled in. She watched. 10 minutes passed before anyone acknowledged her. The first waitress walked past twice, tossing a casual, "I'll be right back," over her shoulder each time. The second time, she didn't come back. It was the third pass when someone finally approached, another server, clearly stressed, holding a pot of lukewarm coffee. He didn't smile. "Want something or just gonna sit?" Haley looked up at him, calm but observant. "Coffee, please." He poured it without comment, then walked away before she could ask for cream or sugar. A few moments later, a crash sounded across the room. A glass of soda hit the floor, ice scattering beneath the booths. The waitress responsible, blonde, still chewing gum, looked down at the mess, sighed, and turned to the busboy with a wave of her hand. "Clean it up," she said flatly. No apology to the customer, no attempt to help. Haley's eyes followed every move. The energy here was so familiar, the shrugging shoulders, the silent resignation. The staff didn't seem cruel, just indifferent. And under it all, something deeper, disconnection. She glanced around. No manager in sight, no one setting the tone. She took another sip of her coffee and nodded to herself. This was exactly where she was needed. The busboy, a lanky teenager with wide, uncertain eyes, moved to clean the mess on the floor. Haley watched as he tried to gather ice with a napkin, his hands shaking slightly. The other waitress barked at him to move faster, then rolled her eyes and laughed to her coworker at the counter. Haley stood up slowly. She walked over to the table where the spill had occurred, helped the teenager gather the last of the ice, and offered the startled customer a fresh napkin from a nearby dispenser. "Thank you," the woman said, surprised. Haley smiled. "You're welcome." Then she turned to the 2 waitresses still whispering behind the counter. "Can I speak with both of you in the back room for a moment?" They exchanged a look. The blonde rolled her eyes. "Who are you?" Haley took a breath. "My name is Haley Jensen, and starting today I'll be overseeing this store and 4 others." The silence that followed her words was sharp and immediate. The blonde waitress blinked, then forced a laugh, like she thought it might be some kind of prank. "Wait, seriously?" she asked. Haley nodded calmly. "Yes, and I'd prefer we talk in private." The other server, taller, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Mira, stepped back instinctively. "Yeah, okay," she muttered. Haley led the way to the back hallway. The staff break room door stood slightly open, and she gestured for them to enter ahead of her. They did, reluctantly, dragging their feet. Inside, she didn't sit. She remained standing, her posture steady, her tone measured. "I'm not here to scare anyone," she began. "I'm here because this location is struggling and it deserves better. So do the customers. And so do you." Mira crossed her arms but didn't argue. The blonde waitress still looked unconvinced. "I get that things have been rough," Haley continued. "Maybe you've been understaffed. Maybe the last manager wasn't supportive. But from the moment I walked in today, I saw something I've seen before. People who've stopped caring because no one cared about them. She paused, letting the silence hang. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort, basic decency, and a willingness to rebuild. The blonde frowned. So what? We're supposed to pretend this place is worth saving? No, Haley said, her voice calm but firmer now. You're supposed to help make it worth saving. There was a long silence. Mira finally asked, and if we don't want to? Then I'll find people who do, Haley said, unflinching. Because I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to feel overlooked. I also know what happens when someone decides to care anyway. She looked at both women. You get to decide what kind of place you want to work in. Neither replied. But they didn't walk out either. Haley stepped back, giving them space. I'll be on the floor. My number's posted in the office. If you need anything, ask. Then she turned and walked out, leaving them behind in silence. Back on the floor, she took her seat again. Her coffee had gone cold, but she didn't mind. She wasn't here for comfort. Over the next half hour, she watched as small changes began to unfold. Mira returned to the floor and refilled a customer's drink without being asked. The busboy seemed to stand straighter. Even the blonde began to move with less resistance, as if still skeptical but curious. Haley made quiet mental notes. She pulled out a small notepad from her bag and jotted down thoughts about the layout, the staffing, the schedule pinned crookedly on the back wall. She made a list, not of what was wrong, but what could be better. One step at a time. She looked out the window as the rain began to fall again, a soft drizzle on glass. The world moved slowly. The smell of bacon drifted from the kitchen. A child laughed from the back booth. Someone dropped a spoon. All of it familiar. Haley leaned back, took a breath, and smiled softly to herself. Let's begin again, she whispered. And so she did. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and an old music shop, the kind of place most people passed without noticing. Inside it was quiet, just the hum of a slow grinder and the faint notes of acoustic guitar drifting from the speakers overhead. Haley sat near the back, watching raindrops trace lazy paths down the window. She clutched a warm mug in both hands, not drinking yet, just absorbing the stillness. Then the door opened. Keanu Reeves stepped in, unhurried, wearing a gray coat over a dark sweater. He spotted her immediately and offered a gentle nod before walking over. Haley stood to greet him, and they exchanged a brief hug, warm, sincere. I appreciate you meeting me, Keanu said as he sat across from her. I was hoping you'd call, Haley replied. It's been a full few weeks. They shared a small laugh, both knowing that full barely captured what she had navigated. The waiter brought over a fresh pot of coffee without being asked. Keanu poured them each a cup and stirred his with the wooden stick, thoughtfully. Like the ritual mattered more than the drink. I wanted to tell you something in person, he said, voice calm but certain. I've decided to step back from daily operations, from the franchise, from all of it, really. Haley blinked. You're leaving? Not entirely, he clarified. I'll still check in, help guide where needed, but it's time. The whole point of building something is to eventually hand it over to the right people. He looked at her then, not just as a boss or mentor, but as someone handing over a legacy. She felt the weight of that gaze, and the trust behind it. Way now? She asked. Keanu took a sip of coffee, then leaned back. Because people like you exist. People who lead with heart and not ego. You didn't just fix one store. You reminded everyone, including me, what this was supposed to be about. Haley's throat tightened. She looked down at her coffee, then back up at him. I still don't know if I'm the right person, she said quietly. Half the time I feel like I'm just figuring it out as I go. He smiled. That's how you know you're ready. You care, you listen, you change things without trying to control everything. She thought of the staff back at Silver Fork Cafe, Mira showing signs of hope, Kyle at his new stove, the new assistant manager, Olivia, rising fast. Every moment had led to this one. "I don't think I ever thanked you," Haley said. "Not just for the job, but for the second chance, for seeing something in me." Keanu shook his head. "No thank you, Haley, for reminding me what mattered." The words landed with quiet grace. Outside, the rain had slowed. Cars passed with soft splashes. The city went about its business. But inside that cafe, something had shifted. A torch had been passed, not with ceremony or applause, but with mutual respect. Haley set her mug down and straightened her coat. "What now?" she asked with a half smile. "You keep going," Keanu said simply. "You lead. You protect what we've built. And you keep choosing kindness, even when it's hard." Haley nodded. "I will." They stepped outside together, the soft breeze brushing past them as the clouds began to part above the Seattle skyline. The storm had passed, not just in the sky, but in the long, emotional arc that had carried them here, from a quiet corner booth on a chaotic Saturday night to a farewell that didn't feel like an ending, but the beginning of something much larger. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to her. "I never give these out," he said, "but if you ever need anything, really anything, you call." Haley accepted it without a word, feeling the meaning behind it more than the object itself. "I'll make you proud," she finally said. "You already did," he replied. They exchanged a nod. No dramatic farewell, no final bow. Just two people who had faced chaos with quiet strength, parting ways with mutual understanding and deep trust. Keanu walked away first, disappearing down the street as pedestrians passed by without realizing who had just walked among them. That was how he liked it. Haley stayed there for a moment longer, the card still in her hand, the cool wind brushing her hair back from her face. She thought about that first day again. How a simple act of kindness, offering water and patience to a man she didn't recognize, had unraveled everything and rebuilt her life at the same time. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she had, and now so many others would too. She turned and walked back toward her rental car, already planning her next visit to another struggling store. Somewhere else, someone like Kyle was waiting for their shot. Somewhere, someone like Olivia needed to be seen. And someone like her was walking in without being noticed. Until now. She opened the door, took one last look at the coffee shop, and drove off into the soft blue light of a city clearing after rain. And so, a quiet waitress became a leader, not because she demanded respect, but because she earned it. Through grace, persistence, and doing the right thing when no one was watching. Just like someone else had once done for her. Have you ever seen someone be punished for doing the right thing? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice might inspire someone else to keep going. And while you're here, what kind of story should Keanu help tell next? A tale of justice, redemption, or second chances? Let us know what speaks to your heart. Like, subscribe, and follow for more true-to-life stories that restore faith in kindness, humility, and quiet courage. Because sometimes, the smallest acts change everything.